Look, man, we see him on TSN all the time, but usually when he joins us, he's wearing a hat, and he's not wearing a hat today.
Yeah.
Big plans today, Chris? What's going on with you, man?
I have a rare Friday morning skate to head to after we're done this, so
okay.
I can't show up in a hat.
All right, that makes sense. The Edmonton Oilers last night, they honored Connor McDavid for hitting 1,000 points. He has 4 assists last night, 10th time in his career he had 4 assists. Zach Hyman returns to the lineup. And like I was joking last night on Twitter, not only is he back, but he's back.
Season starts.
Yeah, he'd been snake bitten pre-injury, comes back, gets 2 last night. If they can get him going, an offense that's already kind of turned the corner a bit can certainly get to the next level, can't it?
Absolutely. And, it's funny. One thing when I was looking at Zach's start is it did seem to me like there was a bit of bad luck in that. I mean, if you look at the amount of shots he was generating, some of the underlying numbers were pretty kind to him. And I can't remember what his shooting percentage was, but it was something like 5%. And when you look at what happened last year, and he was, up near 20%, and obviously, had the 50 goal season, added another 16 for good measure in the playoffs, just didn't seem like something that was going to last. And so, I think that changes things. Because strangely, at times the Oilers, obviously coming off a 6-goal game, it's a silly thing to say, but they haven't maybe scored as much as you'd expect at times this year. And having him in the fold, having him healthy, probably this last little soft bit of schedule where the team didn't play too often was helpful in terms of getting players back in lineup, but even some that have been playing just to rest up their bodies here for a push into the holiday season.
A golden stick for Connor McDavid last night for hitting 1,000 points, and I feel like I'm probably getting carried away with this, so correct me if I am coming across as a massive Edmonton homer here. But I just sort of assume like he's going to get to 2,000. Like, and Wayne's the only one to ever do it. But I mean, if he stays healthy, he's going to get to 2,000 points in his career, and I think that just shows how much of a freak he is that I'm sitting here just expecting him to get to 2,000 points, which sounds insane.
No chance. That's not a homer take. I think that's the right take, quite honestly. And, the only unknown we have is that caveat, if he stays healthy. And for the sport, obviously for Oilers fans, everyone hopes that's the case. But, if he's able to play a meaningful amount of games over another 8 to 10 seasons, I don't have any doubt. I don't even know what the stick is. What's better than gold? I guess, is he get a platinum stick or something at 2,000? But, they should start thinking about it, because there haven't been, as you mentioned, other than Gretzky's the only one who's had to even have a chance to hit that milestone. I think it's well within reach for Connor, and being the 4th fastest to 1,000 points kind of tells you that. I mean, even though he's played in an era that isn't as generous for the scores and the assist rackers up as the 80s was, I mean, he's putting up 80s like numbers every year, and I don't see any reason to see why he's going to slow down in a way that would keep him from getting another 1,000 points in his career.
On behalf of Edmonton, Chris, I'm going to request that you use your hockey insider powers and figure out what's going on with Victor Arvidsson for this city, because Arvidsson was like first listed as day-to-day, and then this week we hear there's no timeline for his return. Like, there was a point when they were expecting him to come back. They're like, yeah, we think he's probably going to play. And now it's funny because when they signed him, you're like, man, if he can stay healthy, Arvidsson can contribute. And obviously he hasn't been to do that so far, but a real mystery injury right now with this guy who I think, when healthy, can still contribute significantly.
Hopefully it's not Sweden when we see him next, right?
This might be the biggest challenge you've ever had in your career, to get to the bottom of the Arvidsson injury, man.
Oh, man, between Yanni Hakanpää mysteries and Victor Arvidsson, some of these guys, it's just like, I appreciate why the teams and even the players maybe want to keep things secret, but sometimes the story takes on bigger legs than it needs to when there is that lack of information there.
Yes.
It definitely is a mystery. I'm with you though, in the sense that I would rather see them give him extra time now than force anything in the regular season, because I think he's one of those little X factor players. No pun on his height. I'm also a shorter guy. But he's a player, I think, when you get into big games in the playoffs and things like that. I mean, obviously played a lot in those situations in Nashville earlier in his career. That can be a difference maker. It's not always going to be a McDavid or Draisaitl if you go on another long playoff run that wins you games. I mean, more often than not, yes, but sometimes you need Matthias Janmark, or in this case, Arvidsson. And so, I think it's wise for them to be cautious at this stage of the season, because we know that there's bigger games and bigger moments ahead. but maybe a little more information would help us fill the void, because I don't quite honestly know exactly what he's dealing with or what's changed there in his status.
Chris, a coaching change in Chicago yesterday. Luke Richardson out. The team, maybe expected to be kind of on the rise, but obviously with the record this season and thus far and being in his third season, Bedard on a bit of a slump. Your thoughts there on the change? An interim coach now brought in, but where does this organization go? Because a job, too, that seems fairly tantalizing for somebody to take on.
Absolutely. And, this almost felt a bit like a mercy firing by the end. I mean, Chicago did not expect to be right at the bottom of the league, this season. And they just have not been able to get any traction. They obviously had a summer where, we might look back and say those were not the best collection of signings, but they spent a lot of money in free agency, bringing in the Teravainens, the Bertuzzi, TJ Brody, made some trades, got Ilya Mikheyev there. They're trying the goal was clearly to be more competitive, to give, a better foundation around guys like Connor McDavid and some of the other young players they have in that organization. And it hasn't worked. And you see a lot of frustration in Bedard. I don't think he's ever struggled to the degree in his life that he has playing hockey. This season, he's been pretty open in the media. And I think it's a tough situation. Whereas, Luke Richardson was on the last year of his deal. And, clearly the kind of axe was hanging a little bit over his head there. And so, they'll turn it over now to Sorensen, who was their AHL coach on interim basis, and do a proper, full search in the summertime. But, there's a lot of pressure, I think, low key in Chicago. Maybe we haven't focused on it nationally enough. But, even in the front office, I just don't think they can wait much longer before you do see that climb. I mean, there's one more year before Connor Bedard's out of his entry-level deal. I don't know what his next contract's going to look like, but obviously it's going to eat up a lot more cap space. And there's a lot of pressure when you have a player like that to make sure you have success. I mean, I don't have to tell anyone in Edmonton that. I know for years it didn't go the way you wanted, when all those first overall picks, and it's only in this last stretch here where they've truly had a team you feel like every year could win the cup. So, Chicago's feeling that right now. And I don't see it as the coach's fault solely by any means. It's a pretty weak roster, quite frankly. And they've got a lot of work to do.
And just keeping on that theme, the Blackhawks 2 points back of the Nashville Predators, who have dropped 6 straight following the shutout last night in Montreal. I mean, what time is it there, Chris?
It's midnight. It's past midnight. I mean, Barry Trotz did an interview this week in Nashville, and he said that, by Christmas, it's going to dictate, basically where the team is at, what kind of decisions he makes, if he starts maybe recalling some players from the AHL that they've been keeping down. Unfortunately, it just hasn't worked in Nashville, and I don't see a way out now. I mean, we can all talk about where the Oilers were in November, or the St. Louis Blues once upon a time, even Florida, the one year snuck in the playoffs and went on a run the first year they got to the Cup final. But, I just feel that they've dug too big of a hole and something is not working. And so they've certainly been one of the teams. We've seen them make a couple minor trades, I'd say. Put Dante Fabro on waivers, lost him to Columbus. They've tried to sort of nibble around the edges, but they might have some bigger decisions awaiting in the new year. I don't think anything is pressing or imminent, but, the reality of where they are is starting to sink in. And, they just can't score, which, when you add Steven Stamkos, at this stage of his career, he was coming off a 40-goal season. Marchessault has filled the net. You wouldn't have expected offensively is where the issues would be, but that's where they've fallen short. And they're particularly weak down the middle. So I think that they'll be an aggressive team as we get closer to the deadline in trying to address some of those needs.
Chris Johnston with us, NHL Insider, brought to you by Pro-Am Sports. Just quickly want to flip back over to the Four Nations. What has been the biggest conversation point around the league amongst yourself and other reporters and insiders post-roster announcement? What has been the discussion point?
Well, I think from a Canadian perspective, Seth Jarvis's inclusion probably, I don't know if you want to say raised eyebrows. It's not like anyone feels that Seth is not a good player, but he just wasn't on the radar externally as much, obviously, as he was internally to get that call. And there's a whole group of younger players the same age as him that I think could have been there instead, whether it's a Nick Suzuki, Robert Thomas in St. Louis, who you guys will see on Saturday, Wyatt Johnston in Dallas. I mean, I think that there's a number of players they were looking at for sort of the 13th forward spot. So that's probably, I would say that was the biggest surprise. When it came to the goaltending with Canada, we all knew it was kind of a grab bag. And, I'm not sure I would have guessed if we talked about this last Friday, for example. I'm not sure Montembeault would have been the guy I said would be likely to be number 3, but I can understand where he's had some success at the World Championship and he's a little younger. I mean, who knows what's going to happen in net for Canada when that gets going? But I don't know that there was any. I don't know that there's any like major surprises. The U.S. leading off Cole Caulfield, given the start he's had, probably ranks as a small one. But at a certain point, you do have to bring players that can kill penalties or be counted on to block a shot, or it can't all just be an all-star team. And so I think Canada and the U.S. in particular had a lot of great players left off, but that was always going to be the case just by the fact there's more than 13 great forwards out there from both of those countries.
I know you just recently dropped a piece on some possible injury replacements if need be. Any of the Oilers on that radar for Canada?
I do think that certainly Stuart Skinner should stay ready, because the one thing we have to keep in mind here is it's 9.5 weeks till the tournament starts, and they can make a replacement right up until February 12th. And so let's say Skinner has a great run through December and January, and then they encounters an injury in net. I mean, it's almost like a fresh evaluation period. And I do think the reason Canada hasn't said to any particular player, hey, you're the next up in goal, you're the next up at forward, is one, because they do have options, and it would probably depend which type of player gets injured. But two, they also just want to take whoever's playing best at the time. And so, while there might be some disappointment for the Oilers that were left off, and players from every country, the reality is if you have a great run between now and February, it's going to be, John Cooper predicted there's going to be 10 injury replacements across the 4 teams. So if that ends up being the case, there's a lot of new decisions still to be made. So, maybe someone like Hyman now getting back in the lineup can still find his way onto the roster. Skinner, I would put in the same category, even Bouchard, right? I mean, I don't see him as far below what they have. And if they have an injury, especially to one of their right shot defensemen, I mean, he should, he's still got an opportunity here to work his way onto the team.
Excellent, Chris. As always, man, really appreciate the time. We'll do it again next Friday.
Have a great weekend. By the way, I did watch the Bozone with my buddy last weekend. We had a couple cold ones and got into the Bozone, and man, we were dying. It was great. So
man, I really didn't think you were going to follow up on that, but well done, sir. That's terrific. All right, we'll tell Tommy. I'll see you later, man. There you go.
See you guys.
That's
Cheers.
Chris Johnston, big Bozone live guy.
What a beauty. I love it.
Yeah. I mean, a couple of beers and sit back and watch Tommy host.
A couple Bronc
A bunch
beers.
of other people try to kill deer. I mean, it's legendary.